This lecture defines two more types of variables that will be important in our discussion of hypotheses: antecedent variables and intervening variables. And antecedent and intervening variables will be crucial in developing a causal diagram that you can use to show how your independent variable and your dependent variable are connected. So in class, we'll be practicing how you can develop these causal diagrams. So first, to get at this idea, let's talk through an example. Imagine that you're doing a study on the relationship between obesity and heart disease. Now we know that people who are more obese are more likely to have heart disease. And the question is why? So you have a hypothesis that obesity itself causes heart disease. So this arrow that we see here means causes, right? Arrows always mean causes when they are straight arrow like that instead of a curved arrow. So a straight arrow, obesity is the independent variable, causes the dependent variable of heart disease. But what causes obesity? Where does that come from in the first place? And in particular, how does obesity cause heart disease? Just because we see that there's a relationship between obesity and heart disease doesn't mean that it's a causal relationship. And so we have to develop a hypothesis that would have some sort of causal logic to it to explain the how that's involved in that causal arrow we show here. So this is what antecedent variables and intervening variables can do. So first of all, let's start with the antecedent variable. An antecedent variable is an independent variable that precedes other independent variables in time, that it comes before the other independent variables. And so this, an important thing to point out here is that it is indeed an independent variable, but the main independent variables of your study, ones that we typically will just call the independent variable or the IV, those are the ones that you're focusing on more. So the antecedent variable is sort of a secondary one that comes before the main independent variables of your study. So our obesity and heart disease example. Well, the question is what comes before obesity, right? And here we can say that high sugar consumption may cause obesity, that it comes before somebody is obese. So looking at this graph, we see that sugar consumption has risen over the past several centuries, as has the prevalence of obesity. And so maybe the sugar consumption itself is what's causing this increase in obesity. So this is what the antecedent variable is. An intervening variable is a variable that comes between the independent variable and the dependent variable in your explanatory scheme, in your causal model, right? So here we have obesity causing heart disease, but the question is, how does obesity cause heart disease? And so maybe your theory is that obesity causes strain on the heart due to the excess weight, and so that leads to heart disease because your heart has to simply work a lot harder. So the causal mechanism involved here would be that intervening variable, that question of how obesity affects heart disease.